Hey there! So I live in a house and it's really old. It's not like super old, but I'm from around the 1930s. When you live in a house that old, there are often problems with the HVAC system. Most specifically, some rooms don't get any hot air when it's cold. So oftentimes you rely on space heaters to make some rooms that are really cold a bit warmer. This is one type of space heater. It's called a ceramic space heater. They're relatively inexpensive. And this is another type of space heater called a convection heater or an oil-filled heater. I sometimes refer to these as radiant heaters, but that's technically not correct. So the reason I'm making this video is because I just bought that one ceramic space heater, and there's something on the box, small room, which suggests that this space heater is only good for a smaller room. Now oftentimes boxes will say that these are best for large rooms, but that's not true. So I would like to point out that at the bottom of the box they have all the different types of space heaters that there are, and they have them ranked for their purposes, or like for what do you need, what benefits do they have. And this is fairly correct. However, room size, never an issue. So let me just go over what the box says. So you have wire element heaters. These are pretty much the cheapest heaters that you have. They just have a wire heating element and they have a fan that blows stuff past them. Then you have ceramic heaters, which are a different type of heating element, and it's a little bit safer. And they also tend to heat up like instantly, so that's one nice feature of a ceramic heater. Then you have convection heaters, which are like the other heater that I showed you. And those, you can see they don't have many stars, but they have this 3 stars under quiet, slow, steady heat. Well, I'll explain that in a minute. Then there's quartz and radiant heaters, and these tend to produce more infrared lights. That way if you're sitting in front of them and the infrared light's hitting your skin, you feel really warm. And then there's utility heaters, which are exactly the same thing as wire element heaters, except they're more rugged, so I don't know why they have different ratings. In fact, they don't. They just say best suited for active homes. No, I don't know why. I mean, just because you have a utility heater doesn't mean you can't use it. But anyway, all of these space heaters generally have in common the power they use. I've never run across a space heater that doesn't use 1500 watts. So for those of you that aren't aware, watts are a unit of power. Now, power can be taken in many ways, but essentially it's just energy. And you'd be surprised to know that watts can be converted into all sorts of other calculations. For instance, 1 horsepower is equal to 746 watts. This is why sometimes you see engines rated in their kilowatt output as opposed to horsepower. But anyway, watts are watts are watts. There's nothing different about any watt. So when you have a space heater that says it uses 1500 watts, it's going to produce exactly the same amount of heat as any other space heater that's using 1500 watts. And the reason why is because electric heating is not more efficient than any other electric heating. To put this another way, when you think about a CFL light bulb, the reason why it's more efficient is because it produces less heat for the same amount of light. So for instance, a 60 watt incandescent bulb produces about the same amount of light as a 14 watt CFL, sometimes 13 watt CFL. Well, those watts, that's how much heat they're creating, essentially. There is some energy that is only light that is still included in that watt equation, but the big thing that we're trying to cut down when we make a CFL is we're trying to cut down the amount of watts it uses as wasted as heat. So when you have an appliance that's purpose is to create heat, all of those watts go to making heat. A slight amount is pulled away to make the fan run, but even that produces some heat because really there's waste heat in every process. So when you have 2 space heaters that are both 1500 watts, like they essentially all are, to say that this space heater is better suited for a small room is just BS, because it's going to produce exactly the same amount of heat as this space heater. So when you're buying a space heater, the only things you really have to consider are what you need it for. For instance, if you have a room that's perpetually cold and you always need to have that heated up, then I would recommend getting one of the convection heaters or one of the radiant heaters like the oil-filled heater that I showed you earlier. The reason why is because they don't get hot enough to set anything on fire. They look like a radiator because that's essentially what they are. They're spreading heat over a large surface area, and that's why they're safest. They're also really slow because of the fact that it's really heating the oil, and the oil then eats the metal inside of the space heater. But that is the safest type of space heater, so I always recommend that if you have a room that you always need heat for. If you have a room that you sometimes need heat for, but maybe when you're only occupying it, then a ceramic space heater is a good way to go because it's sort of like a middle ground of safety. If it tips over, they almost always shut off and they cool down fast enough that there really shouldn't be an issue. Now, those are the 2 space heaters that I would recommend you get. Radiant space heaters, like the quartz infrared space heaters, those work well, but they don't really heat the room so much as they heat the objects inside the room. And it's sort of weird to think of that, but it's like a microwave. How a microwave doesn't heat the bowl something's in, it only heats the food that's in the bowl, and then the bowl gets hot. That's how microwaves work, if you didn't know that. But anyway, So for a radiant heater, what's really happening is it's producing a lot of infrared light which hits things in the room, and then that infrared light gets absorbed in those objects and those objects start creating heat or radiating heat on their own. They don't create heat. That's impossible. Actually, that's not impossible if you had some exothermic reaction going on. But anyway, if you were heating something else from something else and then it created heat on its own, no, it's not creating its own heat. Sorry. So the next time you go shopping for a space heater, look for one that best suits your needs. But keep in mind that this space heater and this space heater use the same amount of electricity, which means they heat rooms equally well. If I put this in a large room on high and let it stay on high for an hour, it will heat up that room just as much as this space heater if I turned it on high and left it on high for an hour. Because guess what? They both consume 1500 watts on high. Lastly, before I conclude, I just want to point out that there is no such thing as a more efficient space heater. There is no way to make electric heat any more efficient than it is, and the reason why is because we're using electricity to create heat. And as I said before, the way that we make things more efficient is we reduce the waste heat that they create. This works for anything because it's basically the entropy in the universe. All energy gets wasted as heat. If you're making heat, you're essentially just wasting energy. And of course that's not true because we're using the heat to heat our homes and keep ourselves alive. But what I'm trying to say here is that if you see a box on a space heater that claims it's more efficient than any other space heater, it's not. So my advice to you is go for the least expensive space heater that fits your needs and make sure that it also has a safety tip over and that it's either ETL or UL listed. So long as you get a safe space heater and you practice good space heater safety around it, for instance, don't put anything on top of them and don't let them fall over or don't put them close to your bed. Fires are started that way. But so long as you get a space heater that is safe and you are safe with it, they will do whatever you need them to do. One space heater will heat it just as well as another. So don't go thinking that you need to buy this one because you have a big room. I would recommend this one just because they're safer and they're quiet. But just so you know, there is no difference. 1500 watts is 1500 watts. Thanks for watching.